Welcome to this Friends of the Glenvivian talk, which is entitled The Paint Sculptor. We're about to see the fascinating work of Aaron Kuiper, who was this year's winner of the BEEP Friends of the Glenvivian Award for Welsh Artists. Aaron is a Welsh-born artist who practices in North Wales. He studied at Cardiff School of Art and under Dave Shepherd and Andre Stitt. He is best known for his singular and pioneering technique of sculptural oil painting, which has earned him multiple awards, including the Discerning Eye and BEEP Painting Prize. His work has been widely shown across the UK in galleries such as the Mall, Museum of Somerset and Cardiff Museum offsite projects, and has also featured in numerous publications, including AM Magazine, Vice and Business Insider. His work is incredibly varied stylistically, conceptually, and in terms of scale, because, as he puts it, if you discovered a new way of painting, you'd have to try everything out also. His work questions the nature of paint itself in a three-dimensional existence. Form and texture begin to take on sculptural meanings with the painted qualities still intact, yet way past the remit of impasto. Thematically, his work is about the seen yet intangible and the unseen but extant, which pervade our digital age, often muddled by stimulacra. Members can say that, stimulacra. Simulacra?
Stimulacra, yeah.
Simulacra, thank you. They require the viewer to explore impossible physicalities where motifs can be elevated or hidden, marks can be loosely fluid or intensely precise, and meaning can be coldly rational or mystically surreal. This continued experimentation and refinement has been part of his practice for over a decade. From complex chemistry to inventing his own tools and entire methodologies to experimenting with form, shape, texture and colour, Aaron continues to push the limits of paint, freed of surface and gravity, from his shed in the middle of the woods in rural North Wales. So I would like now to introduce you to Aaron.
Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Kuiper. Kuiper like the belt of asteroids that rings our outer solar system. It's the same name. Yeah, I'm up here in North Wales and I'm a sculptural painter. I've been doing it for about 14 years, kind of off and on developing it and sort of trying out different things, and that's quite hard to cram down into a short talk. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of talk about firstly what it is, then how I do it, and then just some of the more emergent themes that I've and sort of directions that I've been going in. Because the only real unifier for the whole practice has been experimentation, because, well, nobody's sort of really ever done this before, so you have to kind of invent everything. Like everything I do is dependent upon sort of either tools I've invented or co-opted, completely new techniques and entire methodologies. Yeah, so it's sort of quite a lot to go through. My work is incredibly varied as well, so it's been quite hard to pick themes. And one of the reasons is that basically, if you discovered sort of a new media, a new way of working, you want to try everything in it. You know, you want to see what works, what doesn't. So, but yeah, anyway, so let's get on with. I'll talk you through exactly what my form of sculptural painting is. Can everybody see that first image to start with? Yeah, all good. Okay, right. So I'll try sharing a video now. So what I do, it's fairly simple. So I take a syringe filled with oil paint and I inject into a water-based gel. Because of the chemical repulsion, the paint stays exactly where you put it, and you can kind of work it in real time. That's the base. That's the basis of it. That's what I do. It's a little more complicated than that. But yeah, you can grasp it from that. The paint is pretty standard oil paint. The gel recipe is a bit complicated, but for those of you chemically minded out there, it's a rheology modifier or carbomer if you're making notes in your programs. So yeah, that's basically what it is, and it allows you to really kind of paint in 3D. You can make sort of complex 3D shapes, and it's kind of like, I've never been really a painter or really a sculptor. I've always been sort of between the two, and it's kind of, I think it operates like adding strings to a painter's bow, basically. Like, you have form, shape, texture, color, but then you also have sculptural concerns in there as well, if in a sort of painterly manner. Yeah, so that's basically that's what it is in a nutshell, or a little jam jar, whatever. So how did it start? Right, so about 14 years ago, I was trying to stencil oil paint into discs. Now, I realized this would have been a lot easier with acrylic. And in fact, quite a lot of artists do that. But for some reason, it's lost me now. It needs to be oil paint. There's all kinds of sort of kinky things you can do with adding stuff to oil paint, like waxes and things like that. But I needed something that would separate and allow the pieces to dry. So my tutor at the time, a good painter actually called Ed Rennie, he said to me, "Oh, Aaron, you're just starting. Like, use everything you can find. Everything at your disposal." So yeah, so I started just combining. I used porridge, I used wallpaper paste, sunshine, jealousy, just added anything I could think of. And then I noticed with some materials there was this sort of separation. So it just kind of, it sparked something. I had a bit of a eureka moment. Not quite eureka as in I have it, but I have something, and maybe I can sort of develop this. So yeah, I was continuing to work with this, develop it for years and years and years. I've now gotten to the stage where I can produce reliable kind of works like you've already seen. But it takes, to make these relatively simple things, it takes a lot of prep work and a lot of finishing. Like, you have to build the boxes, pre-mix your paints, like all of that. And so it's about sort of 65% preparation, 35 actual painting time. But yeah, that's kind of where I've arrived. That's why this whole process has been really about experimentation. Yeah, so after I developed it, initially I was meant to be displaying this at that time. Sorry about that. So when I started off, I was doing a lot of kind of more technical. I would do a lot of videos, a lot of animations, things like that. And that was fine. But these pieces, they didn't last very long. They tend to just kind of so they tend to mess up. I don't know if you're familiar with entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics. It's basically anything within a closed system will degrade over time, and these ones did very, very quickly. So that meant that I had to try and make them into actual paintings rather than just animations or videos, about work. I wanted to make them exist for longer, but make them into actual paintings, as opposed to just sort of something that only existed really in a state of flux. So yeah, trialing a lot of different things. I might actually just go on to the next one if I can. Stop you and go next. Right, so when I started trying to make them more permanent, that's after a lot of sort of chemical research, experimentation, I kind of hit upon the idea of sort of inside of the box being ultimately definable, or like a hyper fun space. Like, anything you can think of, or if you have the technical ability to do it, you can do with inside these boxes. It's quite tricky to do, because if you're, say, adding paint in one place, you have to be quite certain of how it will look from the other side or the other kind of direction. So it sort of requires painterly application, but a sculptural kind of mindset, sort of way of looking at it, of thinking about it. But yeah, so I got quite into thinking of it as painting, but in a sculptural way. And with the hyper fun space, I was, started going mad. I mean, in this one here, you'll see the one on the left, there's a flower, a breast, but also some stick figures. So quite like stick figures. But then I started going a bit more figurative, because it was technically very, very difficult to paint and sculpt at the same time, sort of figures, because you have to get it right figuratively if you want to if you want to make it look right. And so a lot of people responded very positively to this. My tutors, however, weren't that impressed, to be quite honest. But yeah, I started sort of going more figurative, but also a little surreal as well, but in a very figurative manner. This one, Head Gardener, you can see it's a mix of sort of figurative elements with sort of semi-landscape and a surrealist kind of tinge to it. Did quite well, this one. In 2011, it won a prize at the Discerning Eye, which was in London, which is great. It's probably a high point in my career this far. So yeah, I carried on with the kind of the figurative sort of portraiture and landscape, sort of running concurrently, just because this is what people responded to, but also what I hoped would sell, because this process takes a lot of money, a lot of time. You can't really have a full-time job and do this. It's quite demanding. So yeah, so I started moving sort of towards more almost like kitsch imagery, but not really, not kitsch in an art sense, sort of a kitsch in a more a general sort of what people find pleasing kind of manner. Yeah, and so I started sort of combining kind of portraiture and sort of surrealist landscape. Again, you can see that here. This is a self-portrait with a dead, mask-like, with a dead tree in the back. I mean, it's pretty easy symbolism to unravel. Pardon me. But yeah, interestingly, this piece, when I first exhibited it, a gentleman offered me £100 and a weekend with his wife for it. So both she and I were quite shocked, and I obviously didn't take them up on it. But yeah, that's the oddest thing I've ever been offered for for one of my works. So I was moving more towards obviously portraiture and the landscape as well. And I was thinking more in terms, this is a test drawing for a piece. I was thinking in terms of showing the person, sort of the portrait, but then also the landscape being able to demonstrate more about them personally or about their life, things like that. So yeah, that kind of culminated. This is Head Gardener 2. It's from a few years later. This is a friend of mine, and she had meticulously planned out the garden that she wanted in the future and that she was planning towards. And so I just sort of mapped that topographically, sorry, on her head. Which, I quite liked. I liked that it was an impossible landscape in a strange shape. And yeah, it was great. So that when this was exhibited, actually, I remember sort of being behind these two little old ladies talking about it. And one of them said, oh, it's lovely, but it is still a head in a box, isn't it? And I was like, oh yeah, no, actually, no, I can see that. I mean, as lovely as it looks, it is sort of still a little macabre. It is it is basically a severed head in a box. So I kind of stopped doing the portraits after that. Probably not because of that, but yeah, I got really more into the landscapes and into the idea that you could have these kind of landscapes that you could that you had to explore sort of from the outside, like Sarah was saying earlier, like you have to go around it and explore to get all of the elements. because it's kind of like this painterly dimension, and although you can't enter it or touch it, you have to kind of explore and touch with your eyes, sort of thing. But yeah, I think with these works, I mean, artists will tell you that you need to see the work in person, and I agree with it, especially painting, and this more so, really. Like, video or photos don't really give you the full sense when you walk around and explore it for yourself. So yeah, so I started moving from the more traditional, I say traditional, landscape, more to the more surreal, sort of using landscape as a tool, sort of what you can communicate with, sort of with these sort of landscape elements. How does that operate? What works with that? So this is a piece called Treehouse, and you can see it's obviously impossible. The canopy is a face. There's a section of the trunk missing where a swing goes. So yeah, again, sort of pretty easy symbolically, but using ingredients that people would recognize and then kind of applying it. And that's very much so with the piece on the left there as well, Rod, which is water wheel in Welsh. You can see the elements of this, whilst sort of beautiful. It's almost kitsch imagery again. It's kind of beautiful. It draws you in because you know what it is and you know how it operates. But then when you sort of move around and you take them all together, it's kind of got a different meaning. For instance, the river coming down and going over a water wheel, which is man-made, into again a pool of water, which is then rising with a dead tree. I mean, it's again pretty simple symbolically, but yeah, quite people sort of enjoyed it. But unfortunately, that sort of presented that sort of thing. It sort of presented a problem in that it wasn't obviously painting. So I did this one, which is a take on Damien Hirst's Shark, or Fear of Death in the Mind of Something Living, I think it's called. But yeah, his had gone cloudy, so I decided to do one that wouldn't go cloudy, and was thinking about how the speech bubble or the thought bubble shows, tells you a bit more about the work and what the shark's thinking. And I was thinking about how that wouldn't work with the actual shark. And it's because this is paint on paint. It's all just paint. It's not. But then I was speaking to a guy about this, and he was asking me. He was like, "Well, what is it? What's in the middle?" And he thought that this was just kind of a shape, like maybe a plasticine shape, dropped into a tank and suspended. And it turns out that a lot of people actually, when they see my work, like photographs of it, they think, oh, these are just solid objects dropped in. They're not, painting made in real time inside this inside this medium. So then I thought, well, if I'm making something that's figuratively quite accurate and people just think they're solid objects, that sort of detracts from the paint, really. That means that the very reason I'm doing this is because it's paint, and you can use paint in a sculptural manner. If I've lost the painterliness of it, then that's almost like the paint has lost its identity, because I might as well do it with any medium. And this kind of thinking, this coincided with the first time in my career being able to make quite a few in a year, sort of about 12 or 13 as opposed to 1 or 2. So I really decided to get going with the painterly aspects and sort of explore what paint was doing in its own right within these boxes, because I needed to see sort of what paint does in a sculptural format, so that it's honest to itself and the viewer, really. So these pieces are exploring a lot of the things that you traditionally do with a normal painting, but then seeing how they act in 3 dimensions. So there's obviously lines, there's normal mark making, there's fills and washes. A wash is a thin layer of paint, dilute layer of paint you apply to a background usually. So I wanted to see, you know, what does that do in 3D? It makes sort of smoky stuff. Yeah, so and so then I sort of kept going with this, and as I said, I was able to make quite a few of them, and I started to try and apply paint, as I've said, in sort of a very in painterly respects and in painterly manners. But then I started to notice that there were really sort of intense differences, to do with the fact that it's not on a surface; it kind of sits on its own. So I was looking at sort of what is line, mark making, kind of texture and color in this new environment, and it got me, and it's sort of thinking about it in this context. If you make work without, say, a background or a ground, then that does odd things to the paint. So basically, a ground is a background. That's what painters call a ground, and that usually informs work, because the very definition of paint is something that you put on a surface to either protect it or for decorative reasons, and that doesn't kind of apply here. And the reason it's different is because even if you have, say, a blank canvas, the canvas isn't really blank. it's a white surface. And you put paint onto it. It is always going to inform the paint. Whereas in a sculptural sense like this, there is nothing to inform the paint but the paint itself. So that is sort of quite interesting. It sort of acts in its own right, in this strange sort of sticky physics kind of dimension. So that calls into question a lot of things, like the relationships between painted elements in this dimension, kind of sort of the actual physical distance between things come into play. Texture does more so than it usually would. Line, mark making, relative position, it's all dependent on each other to inform each other, but it's also dependent on where you view it from, and the ultimate position of the painted elements. So it almost becomes like a function of parallax, which is really, really cool. So going with sort of exploring like lines and just basic marks that you can make. I was sort of doing a few of them. I mentioned earlier that I like stick figures. I think for me they're the ultimate pictogram, and just brilliant representation. So if you could have a stick figure in 3D sort of painting, or line work, that's quite strange what happens to it when it inhabits a 3D sort of space. And then I sort of put them en masse, so that they all inform each other, like they form sort of a dense yet loose kind of collection. And yeah, again, this isn't possible with traditional painting. It's only possible with this. This one became a bit more significant this year. Like I made it a couple of years ago, but yeah, sort of last year actually, it became became quite significant. I mean, there are political things that could be read into this, but yeah, it was just very broad kind of strokes on that sense. So yeah, that's one of the directions. Then I started to think more about sort of ground and background again, because even when works exist in a sculptural form, as the previous two have, they they still don't have, you know, they don't have that background. So what happens when you do put in a background, and you have painted elements sort of dependent on it? This is front and back of sort of basically a play. This piece is just pure play, like just pleasure in form and color and all of this. So it's it's cacophony of different mark making and stuff. And so you can see how relevant that is. But then I also started to note how, although the squares of the back, or the ground of the back, they are informing the foreground, they are still very much acting in a sort of 2D role, which was quite strange, because they are physical, sort of three-dimensional things. And even though the box is really thin, it's only about 7 centimeters, I think. Yeah, it was just crazy how that small distance could sort of change the perceptions of dimensions and stuff. Yeah, it was quite fascinating. So going on ground. So going back again a little to figurative elements in an abstract manner. So this is a piece called Night Lights, and it's a collection of street lights from above. My favorite street lights from around Cardiff. Sorry, where am I? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's a fairly abstract composition, and you see the ground here is just like a matte black. It's it indicates darkness. I think you can kind of tell that things rise up off it, but you're not sort of really sure. But then if we go to a video, you can see how that changes due to position. So what looked like just a background or a ground becomes an actual ground when you go to the side of it. So you've got a physical site rather than, so you've got physical sites in like a pictorial sort of plane. This is the other piece that was exhibited alongside the prize, the award-winning piece, Kelfie. And with this one, I really wanted to bring in all of the aspects that I'd been exploring thus far. And this one's interesting because it's about ground as an ingredient of meaning. Like you can see that the piece is like the hand at the bottom is very sort of solid looking and sculptural. But then there are relatively flat elements and painterly elements in there, like the unicorn and the the marks at the top. And you can see the smoke, that there are symbols in the smoke. So it's all to do with meaning, but it's about what you can do with the physical nature of the paint to forward your meaning, to talk more about your meaning. So so for example, like the symbols that are in smoke, they are kind of there, but they're a bit disparate. But yeah, just visible in the right hand photograph here, there's a matte black ground, again background, but there are physical shapes in relief there that I've brought forward. Can't really see them in these photographs, but yeah, again, if you were to go and explore the piece, you'd see them and be surprised by them. And I quite liked that because it was as if the ground, which gives everything identity, and so therefore a basis for being, is also there with information and represents sort of itself. Yeah, I like the symbolism and representative nature, and I like it done efficiently. So that's kind of what it allows me to do. And so yeah, but then I was also making a lot of stuff sort of using kind of a freestanding sort of sculptural sort of aesthetic, and that was incredibly different, but it was quite it's hard to describe, but each element depends on the other one, but in kind of a vertical sort of totemic almost way, which was kind of strange, really. So they, the pieces sort of exist free floating, but yet I'd made them painterly as well. So we don't tend to read these as you usually do paintings, which is from left to right, because of how the direction that we read here in the West. It tends to be oddly from bottom up, though I've only got a few. I've not got any empirical data for that, really. So reading of sculptural pieces is incredibly different to something that has a definite ground or background. This is also true of the piece Kelfi, which was there we go of the piece. This is also true of the piece Kelfi, which was awarded the Friends of Glyndwr Prize at Beep. Everybody knows what a selfie is, and Kelf is the Welsh word for art. Now, Kelfi does have a meaning in the Urban Dictionary, apparently, but I'm choosing to distance from. This is about Welsh art and the self-portraiture. And if you can see, just in the image on the right, just in the bottom right corner, there is just on the side, there is actually a little self-portrait. So basically, this is sort of in totemic sort of format again. This is all images about social media, or more the how the sort of digital world operates sociologically. Now, we tend to see imagery and respond to imagery, yet that imagery isn't really real. It doesn't kind of really exist. So I coined the kind of usage of this type of imagery to this effect. I call it stimulacra, which is drawing on the ideas of Baudrillard, who I was really into in university, and who's kind of had a bit of a revival over recent years with digital culture. So we tend to sort of respond more to and kind of generally go crazy for images that are stimulating, that cause reactions, and social media algorithms and stuff, they go for things that do stimulate you, whether that be via anger or or beauty, whatever. That's why this piece sort of looks as it does, because I've sort of put together a lot of stimulating imagery to kind of gain a reaction. But then if you connect the images together, you move around the piece and draw the connection and stuff, you start to get meanings, and that's where the selfie Kelfi bit comes in, because it's about, well, there's so many meanings hidden in there. But yeah, if you piece them all together, then you get sort of a clearer picture of the artist or the artist's concerns, and things like that. So yeah, that's why it's called stimulacra. This is the sort of the back and the side, and I think you'll note the painterliness of this. I was very keen to really sort of put that out there, sort of really make it painterly. That's why the portraits are a bit iffy, sort of a bit skew-if, and you can see, for example, the bird from the front looks fairly representative, but yet it is quite a 2D image. I could have made a 3-dimensional realistic looking bird, but then people would just think, oh, it's a solid object dropped into a tank. I wanted to make sure that the viewer was very, very aware that this is painted, that it's painterly, and so you can see sort of from the other side, the bird has been the shape has been taken forward, the outline, but there's kind of some weird color things going on there, and I guess slightly harking back to fairgrounds and things like that with the coloration and style. So yeah, there's all sorts of motifs and symbols running through this. So yeah, too many to go into for now, I think. But yeah, it's interesting this because I wanted it to be as painterly as possible, but yet the viewer would have to assess it in a sculptural kind of manner and right, which is, I think, exactly what Sarah did, and why it was liked. Now, this painterliness and use of it to describe things is something I was, and I'm now still working upon and towards. This is Down in the Valley Tonight. Now, I do a lot of different stuff, but this is probably one of the ones I'm most pleased with. I think is most successful. Basically, this is a semi-abstract landscape. It reads like a landscape, yet it is constructed of a really large amount of varied and abstract forms and different marks. Mark making was really, really key to this one. I really wanted to play with that as much as possible. And the reason I wanted to do this was because this is a complete portrait of the valley I live in. So so not a landscape, but it's an abstract that reads as a landscape that is in fact a portrait. Yeah, don't if anybody hot on theory comes at me with this stuff, just don't. Okay. But yeah, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to get absolutely every element and aspect of the valley I could in there and represent it somehow. So shape, texture, form, color, line, and all are symbolic of different aspects of the Kiro Valley where I live. There's water courses here, there's rivers and ponds, geology is dealt with here, human settlements and constructions. There's the flora, the fauna, the mycelial network, for instance, even like the sounds and smells that I experience kind of walking around, interacting with the environment here. That's all referenced in here. And yeah, it just gives this raucous cacophony of different elements that you can that you can see here. Some of them we can perceive, some of them we can't. But yeah, it's all kind of put together in this. So yeah, no, it was a lot of fun making this one. I'm quite pleased with it. Right, and so that's nearly the end of the talk. I'm just going to talk briefly about what's next, which is sort of the future. So the future of the pieces that you've seen, some of them still exist, some of them don't. The more recent ones do. So because it relies so much upon chemical aspects, it's hard. It was initially in the early days, sort of more than 10 years ago, it was hard to get them to last any length of time. Some of them would go moldy, some would, they'd be too liquid and things. But then again, I've got some which are 15 years old and are still absolutely perfect. It's an odd thing. But yeah, so anyway, the gel I'm using now, I've been using for a few years, and the makeup of it is fine. It's great. It does everything I want it to do. Though I think for the future, I will need to engineer another one, like a new one. And that unfortunately takes me sort of past my abilities chemistry wise. So I'll possibly be looking at getting funding and working with hopefully a university chemistry department, for instance, to just try and develop a better gel that does everything that I wanted to, because this one is fit for purpose at the moment. But it is hard for me to make large quantities, and has a few other things that I think can be improved on, really. But yeah, so for permanence, I think looking at the ones I've got at the moment, I think they should remain that way for a long time. I'm going to hesitantly say my lifetime. But then the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, states that anything within a closed system will degrade over time. So, but yeah, a lot of them seem to reach kind of a settled state, and then barring outside influences like high or low temperature or shaking or dropping, they remain relatively fine. So yeah, if you're lucky enough to own one, don't go outside in the desert, don't live in the North Pole, and don't live in earthquake zones, I guess. Yeah. So what else? As I mentioned, I've sort of see, it's quite hard to get these seen or sort of exhibit places. Like not a lot of galleries really sort of want to touch this. Really, they sort of look at it and find it confusing, so they will dismiss it just to simplify things, because it's quite hard to get across exactly what this is. So yeah, so a lot of the people I've asked have said sort of in terms of kind of moving it forward, really, because I do about 4 or 5 shows a year, usually group shows, opens, things like that, and that's fine. But that's been going on for a while now, and I don't know. I really want to just sort of get on and get this seen. So a lot of people have asked, my peers, they sort of say, well, maybe Britain's a bit too stuffy. Maybe you should try more in Europe, or maybe USA, for instance. They might be sort of more open, receptive to it. But I don't know. I'm just going to keep doing this for the moment. My desire to get these kind of seen and exhibited isn't really sort of vainglorious, and it's not really monetary based either. The reason that I sort of want to get these seen and exhibited more is because they're almost work without context. They don't generate their own context. If you make a normal painting, it already has a context because of the history of painting. Like, same if you make a bronze sculpture or something, that there is already a context for it to fit into. These they don't really do that. They don't have a context. So when I'm making them, I have nothing to go on, nothing for my mind to reference from. So they can reference each other and going back to start, but it's almost like painting in the dark mentally sometimes, sort of, and theory wise as well. So yeah, hope just want to sort of get more, sort of get it out there, get people talking about it. Perhaps that would be great. Working with a friend of mine, Aidan Myers, a fabulous painter. We've sort of looked at twice now. We've looked at putting his paintings and these together. I think that would be really, really interesting. It's unfortunately not come off yet, but yeah, I'm sort of really excited to try and do that. I'd love to, and of course, the Beep exhibition will be coming up next year. So again, I would really love to see these alongside some paintings, some actual paint. I think that could be really interesting to see how they talk and things like that. But yeah, that's so. Just, I guess, like the man said, isn't it? Just keep on keeping on. I want to say that was Fats Domino, but I don't think it was. Yeah, for now on, I'll just keep making work in my shed in the middle of the woods, and then storing them in my spare room, and hopefully I'll be able to bring them out at some point. And yeah. But just like to say thank you very much to the friends of Glenvivian for the prize, obviously, and yeah, for the opportunity to do this. And yeah, if anybody's got any feedback or anything whatsoever, be be great to hear from you. Yeah, thank you very much, and